Let's take a look at this red painting. Red always makes me think of Titian. I think a lot about scale, and every painter knows that scale is very different than size. Scale refers to the size of the figures inside of the painting in relation to one another, and also in relation to the overall rectangle, to the world in which they habit, the painting world inside the rectangle. So we'll get in a little bit closer and you can see that there are some rather dramatic scale shifts. For instance, this large red form right here, and then a very quick jump into these much smaller, these little crackling specks of color to the left. And again over here on the right. I like the feeling of conflict, of things bumping into one another, buzzing around. Paint is a sticky, obdurate medium, and I like there's some evidence of conflict or unresolved conflict in the painting. Also, I like the notion of an aural component to a painting, A-U-R-A-L, a reference to sound. Also an oral, O-R-A-L, because I have tasted oil paint before. Here we are in my studio in New York City, and I get a fair amount of requests from people who wish to come by and see the space and see how I work and how I have everything laid out. So we prepared this short piece to show you that. I want to talk a little bit about color. I love color. And after 25 years of painting, I still come in here every day and I am mystified by the power of color. In addition to some of the obvious names when one thinks of colorists, Delacroix, Matisse, Bonnard, even Stuart Davis, I also study the more obscure names, painters like Oscar Blumner, or the Scottish colorists of the 1920s and 30s, painters like John Duncan Ferguson, or Samuel Peploe. Peploe had a beautiful understanding of chromatic structure through warms and cools to create vibration and luminosity. I also look at the work of the German painter Walter Sickert, and Sickert's not an obvious name when one thinks of colorists. He's known for those dingy, tertiary, reductive palettes. Most of the Camden Town painters were. But I think Sickert had an extraordinary sensitivity to modulation and tone. And through his color, to me at least, communicates a sense of longing and distance that I find irresistible. And I feel like I need to study that type of color handling to be able to use more high-key color successfully. I also grew up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I remember in my grandparents' backyard they had azalea bushes. So every March or so they would bloom, and it would be just this rolling sea of lipstick pink and fuchsia and purple. And I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and I would walk up to the bushes and just bury my face in the petals, almost as if I had to burn the color into my retina. I remember that really well. I grew up near water, and water has subtle but alluring effects on light, and therefore color. And I think that's what made me a painter, long before I had any exposure to art or art history. Light and water and color. It's magic. I guess that's why I live on an island. This is one of the large vertical paintings. It's about 7 feet tall. And again, art historically speaking, the vertical referring more to the human presence, to the figure, as opposed to the horizontal format referring to the landscape. But this certainly has numerous landscape elements. You can see that cascading, meandering horizon moving down. Also this icy green series of marks that go side to side, expanding and contracting in the space. And then there are these thick, sticky, saturated plugs of paint stacked and all collected and compressed and put into this space here. And I think that these chunks, these fractals, come from my love of cubism, from the idea that two things are happening in the painting. On one hand, it's self-referential. The paint refers to itself, to its skin. And then at the same time, a nascent image tries to come out, and then it flip-flops back to the paint again. I like that it's kind of an internal conflict in there. One of my favorite painters, and always has been, is Thomas Gainsborough, who lived from 1727 to 1788. And what I love about Gainsborough, and what I love about most Rococo painting, is that it flirts with the notion of artificiality. Gainsborough is known for those long, elegant portraits. But there's always a bit something odd in those paintings to me. They represent, I think, a beautiful marriage of the human figure to the idea of the landscape. And I say the idea of the landscape because it doesn't seem natural at all. It feels quite artificial, quite shallow spatially, and artificially lit, almost as if it's on a movie set, sometimes from two sides, the lighting. Gainsborough was also a marvelous and very accomplished landscape painter. And if you look at some of the landscapes from the 1760s that he did in Bath, you'll see what I mean. He would take the equivalent of salad tongs and he would dip them with sponges into pots of black and umber, and he would lay in general masses of darks in his paintings when he began. It's about 800 square feet, and it's got north-facing light, which is nice, even though I don't care about natural light. I like artificial light. Let me show you a couple of things first that are special to me. And there's a couple of brushes from the self-taught painter John Searle, who lived in California. And there's a picture of John and I had the pleasure of knowing him. The leaf is from Glenn Gould's headstone in Toronto, which I also got about 20 years ago. And then down here, I have a number of quotes around, but one of the most important to me is this one: "Stay hungry, stay foolish." And that was from the British painter Michael Tyzack, my dear friend and mentor. And I think it's one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten. And I'll show you some of the things on the table. First of all, you can see lots of mistakes here. Lots of just curdled, dry oil paint. These big mounds accumulate over months and months, and then I throw them away, and then another one starts. We have sandpaper. We have latex gloves, which is very important if you paint in oils for the mediums. And then as we go over, this is where I keep most of the large tubes. I tend to use the large 100 milliliter tubes like this, 200 milliliter. And it looks chaotic. It's actually quite orderly. I know where everything is based on the shape of the tube from the day before. Then we have traditional palettes, which I use, like these. And you can see I generally mix one hue per palette, and I'll work on a tonal range of that color on that palette. And I have these Tupperware pots that I use to mix the mediums for each color as I go along. Then the area here in the center is for the mediums themselves. Galkid, liquid, linseed oil, safflower oil, walnut oil, and a few secret things that I won't tell you about. And then brushes over here. Many, many different sizes. You can see from that to something like that. Some of these I've had since high school. And then small tubes over here. And then the office area where I spend generally about the first hour, hour and a half every day for correspondence and paperwork. And it's got computer, radio. I don't listen to, lately I've been listening to books on tape and talk radio while I paint. But I do play many various types of music as I work as well. And lucky horseshoe over there on the wall. That's important. I'm superstitious. And it's a great space. I have a good life.